Hello everyone. Today we're back to talk about fossils and a specific area called the Badlands. You may or may not have heard of the Badlands before, but just in case you're curious, let's click on the globe and see where the Badlands are. The Badlands National Park is in South Dakota, so as the globe was turning, you could see this is where it is. Now this is all North America right here. This is the United States, okay? And this is South Dakota. We're over here in New Jersey. This would be South Dakota over here. Okay, so it's sort of in the middle of the United States. These rock formations are found in Badlands National Park in South Dakota. The colorful horizontal bands are layers of different kinds of sedimentary rock. So what they mean by that is as you look through here, horizontal means sideways, right? Side to side. You can kind of see going straight across here is like an orangey brown layer. Then it gets a little lighter right here, and then it's back to this, and then it's lighter, but then it's darker, and then it's lighter. These horizontal bands are different layers of rocks that have formed over millions of years. Sedimentary rock is formed from sediment on Earth's surface. Okay, so sediment, you guys know what sediment is from all the lessons that we did in the last unit. So the sediment is deposited, remember deposition, right? In layers on land or on the sea floor. Over millions of years, the layers harden into rock. The oldest layers are on the bottom and the newer layers on top. Okay, so imagine as things were forming over millions of years, some wind came along or some water came along and, weathered rocks, right? And the rocks eroded and the sediment went away and it was deposited somewhere. Well, guess what? That kept happening. So over millions of years, some sediment would deposit there, and then more sediment would deposit on top of that, and more on top of that, and more on top of that. Eventually, all these little pieces of sediment, from all the pressure of more and more sediment being added, they would harden into one complete rock. Okay? Imagine that this structure right here, this rock right here, okay? Imagine that this at one point was all little bits of sediment that somebody took the time to push together, not people, but elements like weather and things like that. Just over time, just kept piling up and piling up. And over time, the weather had also, gravity and all those other things we talked about in the last unit, caused it to bond into one whole rock that you see here today. So water, wind, living things, all those things could have caused the sediment to break off where it was. It was eroded. It was deposited here. This is just one example. And over time, more and more deposits of sediment laying on top of each other solidified into one large rock right here. It's important to know that the oldest layers are on the bottom. So whichever sediment came first is actually at the bottom, and then the newer sediment goes on top. Okay? Imagine if you were folding your clothes. The clothes that you folded last week would be underneath, and the new clothes that you folded on top of those would go on top, right? It's the same thing with rocks, okay? So this up here would be the newest part, and this down here would be the oldest part. Each band of rocks started out as a flat layer of sediments. The sediments included remains of plants and animals. Some of those remains became fossils, or traces of plants and animals that lived long ago, okay? So not only was the sediment included in this, but if there were any plant or animal remains that got, say, washed away or blown away and ended up depositing with the sediment, that was stuck in there as well when the new rock came and the new sediment came and deposited on top of that. So all through here could be fossils because as those plant and animal remains were stuck in the sedimentary rocks, some of them became fossils. Scientists use fossils to tell what kind of organisms lived at the time the different layers of sediment were laid down. The location of certain fossils also indicates the order in which rock layers formed. So it's very interesting to think that depending on what kind of fossils you find in the layers can describe what the land was like. For example, if you're finding mammals like beavers and woodchucks, if you're finding animal remains of those, fossils from those, this would indicate that maybe this was the type of area that would have supported that. However, if you find fish fossils, that would be an indication that at one point this rock was underwater. It's pretty interesting to think about, right? So you might be wondering a little bit more about this. It's a little bit hard to understand without looking at it. So we have a little slider over here that's going to let us see it. So this is supposed to be an example of this rock over here, okay? And as we slide it up, it's going to reveal the colors, and it might reveal some fossils that could be found in this layer, okay? So this layer down here is what we're showing here, this like grayish, bluish kind of thing going on here. This rock layer they were able to determine was formed 75 million years ago. So remember, when we say things like erosion and deposition happen, they do not happen overnight. They take a really long time to happen. Ammonite fossils are found in layers of limestone or shale and show that this area was once at the bottom of the ocean. So in this area, just like I said, depending on the kind of fossils you can find there, you would find out that at one point this was underwater, okay? Obviously, it's dried up since then, since there's no water located in this picture anywhere. Okay, and limestone and shale are just types of rock that are included in the sedimentary rock. Okay, so this type of fossil would indicate that at 75 million years ago, this was underwater. If we move up to the next section, we see like a orangey and yellowy section. The orange and yellow layers formed from mudflats and forest soils. These layers include clay-filled holes, which show that big trees grew in the soil. So what I'm thinking is, after this was no longer under the ocean, another 10 million years after that, because now this is 65 million years ago, still a really long time ago, that because of the wetness of the environment, after this was no longer underwater, it supported an environment with big, tall trees. We go up to the next one. This is only 37 million years ago, which of course is still a really long time ago. It says the pale gray and green layers were deposited when there were forests, rivers, and shallow lakes on land. Fossils include enormous mammals that lived on savannas. Okay. So then at one point again, this area was one that was filled with trees and had rivers and lakes on land. As a matter of fact, South Dakota, where the Badlands is located, if you remember way back to the beginning of Unit 5, when we talk about rainfall and the types of living things that lived in certain places, you would find that at this point right now, the Badlands are partially located in the Central Plains grassland and partially located in the desert. Okay, so it's very interesting to think that at one point, this desert type of land, and that's sort of what this looks like to me right now, was once similar to either the Pacific Northwest or the Eastern Temperate Forest, right? If we scoot up a little bit, this is a very large section. Now, this is a section that formed about 33 million years ago. That's still such a long time ago. The most colorful rocks were deposited when the climate was changing the land from a wet floodplain to a drier grassland. Fossils found in these rock layers include tortoises. I mean, it's so sad to think, but that is an amazing looking fossil. Can you imagine? Okay, so again, it's telling us about the climate change. At one point, this was underwater, then it moved to more of like a Pacific Northwest forest, an Eastern Temperate Forest, and now they're saying it's more like a grassland. Okay, now let's go up to the top layer. And this is only 30 million years ago. I mean, of course, seriously, 30 million years ago is still such a long time ago. The light-colored layers include sandstone and layers of ash from volcanoes. How cool is that? Fossils of desert plants show that the land was very dry. So the evolution of this land right here, it's such an interesting story that the rock layers are able to tell us how over time, just like people change, this land changed. You know, you're a different person from when you were first born, and then you've gotten older and you're a different person now. It's the same thing as the rocks. It tells a life story of these rocks, and it's just amazing to think about. Okay? All right, so before we sign off for the day, let's go over some important points. Sedimentary rock are made from pieces of sediment from Earth's surface, and we know that those got there because of weathering, erosion, and deposition. Okay? Over millions of years, they hardened into rock. The oldest layers are on the bottom and the newer layers are at the top. That's an important detail to remember. Fossils are traces of plants or animals that lived long ago. These fossils can be found in the rock layers, and the rock layers give us an idea of how old something is, and what the land was like at that time, because when we look at the fossils, it can give us an indication of what the land was like by looking at what exact fossils were found in there. Okay, so again, if there were shells or fish fossils, you know that that area was once underwater, just like it showed down here at the bottom. Okay? All right, so I hope you guys enjoy your time to climb, your fill in the blanks, and your open-ended, and good luck.